We are going to dive into everything that you want to know about acne, from the differences between hormonal acne and non-hormonal acne, what makes it worse, what makes it better, dietary strategies, and supplements and herbs that can make a difference. So buckle up, let's get into it. So in a nutshell, acne forms when the skin overproduces sebum, that's the oil that it makes, coupled with low turnover. So dead skin cells can build up inside the pore, causing it to clog. Bacteria that's there can then start to multiply and increase inflammation, and then our immune system gets involved. So white blood cells come to try to clear this infection. That's when we see the pus. There's different types of acne. There's blackheads and whiteheads, known as closed and open comedones. And there's also things like pustules. Those are those like white pussy looking ones with the head. There's also papules, and papules are just sort of red bumps on the skin that look pretty angry and irritated, but they don't have that pussy white head like we'd see in a pustule. There's nodules. Nodules tend to be flesh tone color, and they're larger. There's no head on these, but they're not quite as large as a cyst that we see in cystic acne. Cystic acne is the deep, large, painful acne that you can get, which doesn't really have an opening or a head and is quite painful. There's also maturation arrest acne. This one's talked about a lot less. This one looks like texture. It's commonly on the chin and under the lip area, but it can be on the cheeks as well. What this looks like is tiny little cobbly flesh tone bumps. There's no head on it, but if you squeeze them, you'll usually get some white stuff that comes out. Then you're disappointed to see by the next morning or a couple days later, it seems like they fill back up. So maturation arrest is a different type of acne because the inflammation part isn't there. It's like the immune system hasn't got involved and doesn't help to clear the infection, right? With some of the other forms of acne, the immune system gets involved, it gets red, it gets pussy, and then typically it heals up. Cystic acne is an exception here because we don't typically see cystic acne clear up readily and easily on its own. One of the main components to maturation arrest acne is poor cell turnover. It's like you're not sloughing off your skin effectively, so it's sort of just building up but not getting inflamed. So let's dive into all the different factors, from hormones to food to supplements to lifestyle practices, that can affect and lead to all these different types of acne. Okay, we cannot talk about acne without talking about stress. And no, I don't mean that having acne gives you stress, because that's true too, but high levels of stress can impact your skin through its influence on cortisol. And when I say stress, it can mean mental, emotional, or physical. So let's talk about all those first. Common sources of stress, of course, are things like work stress, emotional stress from marriages or relationships or kids. Common physical sources of stress are things like blood sugar imbalances. So if you're somebody who does intermittent fasting, or you tend to skip meals and have irregular meals, what happens is your blood sugar is sort of on a roller coaster. When your blood sugar's low, you have to stay alive, right? So what your body does is it releases cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and cortisol tells the liver to then release glucagon, which then releases sugar to get your blood sugar back up so you live. That's all fine and dandy, keeps us alive. But if your blood sugar is constantly low because you're skipping meals or intermittent fasting, it's demanding cortisol, 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 and that can create a lot more stress in the body. The other element is eating things that are really, really high in sugar and spiking that blood sugar response. Every time you do that, you have a spike, you have a crash, cortisol. We're going to get into insulin and its impact on acne next, because that has to do with sugar too. The other thing that can really increase stress in the body is over-exercising and overtraining. I'm sure you've seen a lot of your favorite fitness girlies and fitness influencers who struggle with hormonal acne, and that's because they often engage in really intense workouts coupled with undereating. When that happens, your body's like, okay, I'm only getting this many calories, but I need this many calories to keep up with my intense training, to keep up with all my stresses of life. So what happens? It's a stress to the body, cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. Also, not getting enough sleep. This is probably the biggest thing you can do for your skin, is start prioritizing sleep. Like, no matter what. Even if that means you have to skip your morning workout, you're much better off getting enough sleep, 8 to 10 hours, that's true for women, than getting only 5 or 6 to get in your morning workout or, do whatever you want to do. And that's true for weight loss too. So if you're trying to lose weight, high cortisol isn't going to be your best friend here. So please, please, please prioritize sleep. Okay, so many other causes of stress, but those can all increase cortisol over time. So what does that have to do with our skin? When cortisol's high, we're also going to release something called DHEA. These two both come from our adrenal glands, and cortisol is very catabolic, right? Meaning it can break tissues down. When it's released in high levels for a long period of time, we can start to see the skin sort of look thinner. Our barrier, which is very important for keeping microbes out, can start to decline a little bit. So overall, cortisol has a very weakening effect on our tissues, on our skin barrier, on our gastrointestinal barrier, which is also very important for our health and our skin health. So cortisol being high, not good. DHEA, on the other hand, is an androgen, meaning it's kind of in the male testosterone category. So it's coupled with testosterone. So it's going to cause things like increased sebum production, right? It's going to cause things like acne, as well as more inflammation in the skin. So both of these together are sort of a nasty combo for acne. Acne that's caused by high stress isn't always coupled with our periods, so we don't see it always follow that hormonal cycle when we get our periods, but what we do see is it increases when stress is high. So if you're chronically under stress, that could just literally be all the time, or you might find it peaks up when it's like exam week or work deadlines are just right around the corner. And this type of acne can vary in how it looks. I would say we typically see an increase in kind of those papules, the ones that are just like the red inflamed looking, as well as the maturation arrest type. So remember those little cobbly, just like texture on the skin? That's what I see most common with high stress and high cortisol. But of course, there's other things that can impact, and we can see cystic acne, we can see blackheads and whiteheads, just depending on what other factors are at play. Okay, now on to another super important element, insulin. So insulin is the hormone that responds to sugar that we eat, right? When we eat sugar or simple carbohydrate, what will happen is our blood sugar goes up. Insulin, which is released from the pancreas, says, oh, okay, you need to go into the cells. So insulin goes up, tells the sugar to go into the cells, and then both should come back down. If that happens too often, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you have other sort of insulin resistance conditions, including PCOS, what can happen is you start to become insulin resistant. So that means blood sugar goes up, insulin's released, receptors don't really listen. They're like, no. So then we need more insulin to get the same response. If that still goes down, we're in that insulin resistance phase. But after a period of time, no matter how much insulin's released from the pancreas, the sugar still doesn't really go into the cells. That is diabetes right there, right? So there's sort of a spectrum of insulin issues. And even without diabetes, you can still have those insulin issues. So why is that important when it comes to acne? Now, insulin is a growth hormone. So what it does to our skin is it's going to tell our sebum to increase, as well as like our pore size. So if you find that your skin looks like really oily with large pores, you'd really want to focus on insulin and blood sugar balance. On top of that, when you're insulin resistant, that means your blood sugar is going to be higher, right? High blood sugar feeds things like bacteria, feeds things like candida and yeast. These are things that naturally are part of our microbiome and that live on our body. So when blood sugar's high, you're going to be a lot more prone to these skin infections and skin irritations. Yeast, fungus, when it overgrows on the skin, it creates really like red, inflamed, irritated look, which of course is going to disrupt your barrier, isn't going to be really great for your skin complexion overall. Another element to this is how insulin affects testosterone. So what we're talking about here is PCOS. Some people call this diabetes of the ovary. So insulin resistance, which then increases insulin, increases blood sugar, can affect the ovary. And what insulin will tell the ovary is, hey, stop ovulating, stop producing progesterone and estrogen. Let's just make testosterone instead. So high insulin can equal high testosterone. Testosterone, I think a lot of you probably know, increases acne, increases sebum production, increases things like cystic acne. So it's similar to the effect of DHEA on the skin, but high testosterone can be amplified. It can be even worse, especially if you're somebody who likes to convert testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. That's a more strong metabolite of testosterone that can make your acne even worse and also cause things like hair loss and like hair growth on the face. So in a nutshell, the more that we can control blood sugar and insulin levels, the happier our skin is going to be. A lot of that comes down to food choices. So let's talk about food choices and how that affects the skin. Like and follow for the next video.